Okay, so in this section now we're going to be talking about the historical sources regarding the life of Jesus. We're going to get into those documents. What are those documents from ancient history? Where can we go to learn about the real Jesus? Now, before we get into this, I just have to clarify something, because a lot of people just get confused about this. So let's just clear the air right now. You have to understand, because when we're going to go talk about the historical sources regarding Jesus, we're going to be getting into the New Testament, which is obviously part of the Bible, but the New Testament and the Bible itself is not one historical source. You have to understand this. The Bible is not just one book written by one author. It is a collection of books, a collection of works written by different authors over a very long period of time. So when we start talking about different parts of the New Testament, that is not one historical source. That is a collection of many different historical sources. Now, this is probably obvious to a lot of you, but trust me, a lot of people don't get this. So a lot of people think that if you start talking about the New Testament, oh, that's just, that they treat it kind of monolithically. That's just one historical source, the New Testament. But it's a collection of works. It's a collection of different works written by different authors. So, the author of Matthew is not the author of 1 Corinthians. Okay, these are different works. So just because they've all been collected now into what we call the New Testament or the Bible, they are still separate, independent historical works. So please, if you didn't already know that, please make sure you understand that now. Let's talk now about those different historical sources for the life of Jesus. Now, these historical sources for the life of Jesus can be divided into three main categories. Now, first off, you have the Gospels, and this is what everybody thinks about when we're talking about the life of Jesus. So we've got the Gospels here, that is Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. The next type of historical source for the life of Jesus are the New Testament epistles. Now, we're going to talk more about this in a minute, but these are basically the letters of Paul, James, John, Peter, the New Testament epistles, that is, the epistles outside of the Gospels. These are different sources, as I've said before. The third type of historical source for the life of Jesus are the non-Christian documents, documents outside of the New Testament, but also written by non-Christians. So writers like Josephus, Tacitus, Pliny, Suetonius, and a few others. So these are the three main historical sources for the life of Jesus. You've got the Gospels, you've got the New Testament epistles, and then you've got the non-Christian writings. Now, regarding the Gospels, we have to make an important clarification. First of all, you got what we could call the Gospels proper. That is, the Gospels in their finished form, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. But what you also need to know is that most scholars today think that the Gospel writers used sources. They had access to sources when they wrote their own Gospels. This comes from a certain internal analysis of the Gospels. When you look at all the texts and you lay them out side by side, you can see certain commonalities and differences which indicate that they had different sources. And scholars name these sources in this way. You have what scholars call Q, the Q tradition. That's just material that's in both Matthew and Luke, but not anywhere else. You've got what's called the M tradition, which is just material that is found only in Matthew. You've got L tradition, which is material found only in Luke. It's also recognized that there are oral traditions behind the Gospels. And you have what some scholars call a pre-Markan tradition, which is the source where the Gospel writer Mark got his material. So we'll talk a little bit more about this later, but for now, I just want you to know that when we talk about the Gospels, we could talk about just the Gospels proper, that is in their final format, or we could be talking about the Gospel sources behind them. But again, we'll get into this a little bit later.